Well, hello and welcome back, or welcome for the first time if you're just joining us for the first time of our preparing for the admissions and release committee. Today is session 3, and this is meetings of the IEP team. I do want to go over just a few housekeeping items to begin with. Excuse me, the chat and question and answer box has been enabled. Feel free throughout the presentation, if you have questions, throw them in there. We have staff on here that will notify me or assist in answering those questions. We do ask for grace. We work from home. You never know when a situation may arise with internet or the computer, or an animal may pop in the background or bark to say hello. And most importantly, make sure you're taking care of yourself. If you need to step away for a moment, take that time. We are recording these series, so if you have missed a moment of the presentation because you need to take care of a personal issue, do that. We want you to be comfortable as well while we're going through this learning process. Okay, Kentucky Special Parent Involvement Network. For those of you who may not know who we are, I'll give just a brief information about us. We were founded by the U.S. Department of Education under IDEA since 1988, when Kentucky first received a PTI. Kentucky SPIN Parent Center provides training, information, and support for children and youth with all types of disabilities, birth through age 26 years old and beyond, their parents, families, and professionals. It's also important to know that we do not require a diagnosis. So if you're unaware of a disability, or a disability isn't even on your radar, we will not turn you away. We're here to assist anybody and everybody that we can. It's easier for us to tell you what we do than what we do not do as opposed to what we do, because we do so much to help assist families. We are not attorneys and we do not act as advocates. However, our role is to empower families to effectively advocate for their children, as well as youth to advocate for themselves. We do this by utilizing a peer-to-peer model and supports to help families access needed information and resources. So today is going to be meetings of the IEP team, so session 3, and next week will be our last session. As you see here on the screen, we'll be going over least restrictive environment and decision making next week. So we hope to see you back for that as well. Meetings of the IEP team. Describe what the idea of 2004 requires with respects to meetings of the IEP team and what goes on there. And if you don't care, in the chat box, I would like for you to list one word that describes your feeling about IEP meetings. And this is completely non-judgmental. So good, bad, or indifferent. What is one word that you feel can describe IEP meetings? Ooh, I like that one. Overwhelming. Stressful. Those are some good ones. You know, some IEP meetings can be absolutely wonderful and can go completely stress-free, and can be really a resolve to that child's needs and their educational success. But we understand sometimes they don't go as easy as we would like, and they can be stressful because we may not understand words that are being used or evaluation results that may be given. So it can seem overwhelming. There may be a disagreement amongst ourselves as parents and the professionals in the educational setting. And that's okay to feel overwhelmed or feel stressed out sometimes. But hopefully, as we go through this this session of the series, you'll feel more comfortable in how to resolve some of those situations. So, words to know. Admissions Release Committee, or ARC, is a group of individuals responsible for developing, reviewing, or revising the individual education program for a child with a disability. Composed of the child's parents, child, or youth, if appropriate, regular education teacher of the child or youth, special education teacher of the child or special education teacher who is, knowledgeable about the child's suspected disability, a representative of the a representative or LEA knowledgeable about the general curriculum and the availability of resources, an individual who can interpret the evaluation results, an individual who can interpret the instructional implication of the evaluation results, and an individual who has knowledge or special expertise regarding the child, related services, personnel as appropriate, also referred to as the IEP team. Prior written notice, or PWN, that informs parents of their rights. It is a form that the school must use to tell parents why they're doing what they're doing and why they're not doing what they're doing. They must tell parents in writing. State Education Agency, SEA, Kentucky Department of Education. A local education agency, LEA, local public school district. Everything you wanted to know about IEP team meetings, scheduling the meeting, developing the IEP, special factors IEP team must consider, excusing a member from the meeting, and implementing the IEP. This session also looks at reviewing and revising the IEPs, when the IEP can be amended without an IEP team meeting, and special IEP situations. Who must a public agency include on the IEP team? Parents, special educator, regular educator, a representative of the district, someone to interpret evaluation results, others with knowledge or special expertise about the child. So what's in the IEP? The child's present levels of academic performance and achievement and functional performance, including how the child's disability affects the child's involvement and progress in a general education curriculum. The same curriculum as for non-disabled children. For preschool children, as appropriate, how the disability affects the child's participation in appropriate activities. Measurable annual goals, including academic and functional goals, designed to meet the child's need that results from the child's disability to enable the child to be involved in and make progress in the general education curriculum and meet each of the child's other educational needs that result from the child's disability. As a general, as used in this part, the term individual education program, or IEP, means a written statement for each child with a disability that is developed, reviewed, and revised in a meeting. Functional performance includes how the child's disability affects the child's involvement in the progress in the general education curriculum. For preschool children, as appropriate, how the disability affects the child's participation in appropriate activities. A functional goal designed to meet a child's need that results from the child's disability to enable the child to be involved and make progress. The child's disability. For children with disability who take alternate assessments aligned to alternate achievement standards and a description of benchmark or short-term objectives. And just so that we are aware, an alternate assessment or an alternate diploma is going to be different than just a generalized education diploma that a student receives in order to graduate. Supplementary aids and services based on peer-reviewed research to the extent practicable to provide to the child or on behalf of the child, and statement of the program modifications or supports for school personnel. Transfer of parental rights at age of majority. A state may provide that when a child with a disability reaches the age of majority, and that would be age 18, under state law, that applies to all children. For a child with a disability who has been determined to be incompetent under state law, the public agency must provide any notice required by this part to both the child and the parents. Children who are incarcerated in an adult or juvenile state or local correctional institute. Whenever states provide for the transfer of rights under this part pursuant to this paragraph of the section, the agency must notify the child and the parents of the transfer of rights. A state must establish procedures for appointing the parent of a child with a disability, or if the parent is not available, another appropriate individual to represent the educational interest of the child throughout that period of the child's eligibility under Part B of the Act. If under state law, a child who has reached the age of majority but has not been determined to be incompetent can be determined not to have the ability to provide informed consent with respect to the child's education program. An explanation of the extent, if any, to which the child will not participate with non-disabled children in the regular class. A statement of any individual appropriate accommodations that are necessary to measure the academic achievement and functional performance of the child on the state and district-wide assessments. State or district-wide assessments of students' achievement. A statement of why, if the IEP team determines that the child must take an alternate assessment instead of a particular regular state or district-wide assessment of the student, the child cannot participate in the regular assessment, and the particular alternate assessment selected is appropriate for the child, and the projected date for the beginning of the service and modifications, and the anticipated frequency, location, and duration of those services and modifications.
Well, and Amber, I just wanted to mention there too on the alternate assessment, just sort of a reminder, only 1% of the total population of children with disabilities that have an IEP should be on alternate assessment. So that is a very low number of the children who would be on that. And again, it should be decided on an individual basis on what's appropriate and best for that child, not based on the disability they have, but what's appropriate for them.
Yes, absolutely. And it is a process of several different factors. So it wouldn't be a factor of, well, this child has this diagnosis, or this child has an IQ at this level, this child, it would have to be several different factors coming into play and what that individual student, what's best for that individual student. As we continue to look at what's in the IEP, transition services beginning not later than the first IEP to be in effect when the child turns 16 or younger, if determined appropriate by the IEP team, and updated annually. Therefore, the IEP must include appropriate measurable post-secondary goals based upon age-appropriate transition assessments related to training, education, employment, and where appropriate, independent living skills. The transition services, including courses of study needed to assist the child in reaching those goals. Transfer of rights at age of majority, beginning no later than 1 year before the child reaches the age of majority. Under state law, the IEP must include a statement that the child has been informed of the child's rights under Part B of this Act.
Amber,
Yes, ma'am.
could you please go to the next slide? I think we're off a little bit on our slides. Thank you, Susan. I think, so we'll get that lined out there. We're just a little off on our slides here for a minute.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. And the IEP must include a statement that the child has been informed of the child's rights under Part B of the Act, if any, that will transfer to the child on reaching the age of majority, which is 18 in the state of Kentucky. And also Kentucky, I want to clarify because it says here as the child turns 16 or younger if determined. So in Kentucky, that would be age 14 or grade 8, whichever comes first. So it would be just a little bit younger to start those transition, to start the transition process. Coming together is a beginning. Keeping together is progress. Working together is success. What word repeats here more than any other word? And the answer is together. This quote implies that working together doesn't just happen. If working together well doesn't just happen, what makes it ever happen? Think of the best team you've ever worked on and what made that team successful. If you don't mind throwing that in the chat, thinking back to the best team you've ever worked on or worked with, why was that team so successful? And while I'm giving you a moment to do that, I will go on just a little bit, but I'll come back to some of those answers. So IEP teams as diverse groups, by the very requirements of IDEA, IEP teams are made up of individuals who bring different perspective and expertise to the table. This diversity is intended to invest the team with the ability to craft an individualized response to a specific child's individual needs, taking into account that the same child's individual strength and talents. The law also makes it clear this is the goal of an IEP meeting and the team itself, developing an IEP that is appropriate for that individual child. Thus, by design, an IEP team brings together two of the greatest assets research tells us that a team can have. And I'm going to go back and check and see. We value each other and inclusivity, and absolutely. And that's what it's all about, bringing the best of both worlds together and sharing the expertise. We hear a lot of the times, I'm just the parent, or how many times as a parent have we said, I'm just the parent? But we bring a wealth of knowledge from being just the parent, things that educators don't always get to see about our children, their likes and dislikes. And when we are teaming up with the educators, they bring a wealth of knowledge into specific areas that we may have not went to school for or studied for, and help bring a better understanding as to why our child does something, from a clinical standpoint or an educational standpoint. And when we bring all of this together, it only benefits our student even more.
Well, and I think too, outside of the student themselves, who is the most important member and part of the team, the parent is the most important as well, because there is so much that we do bring to the table, and we are experts in our children and our families, and that's invaluable.
Absolutely. This slide focuses on the first meeting after the child is found to be eligible for special education and related services. IDEA 2004 maintains the requirement of all previous versions of the law since 1977 that the meeting to develop the child's IEP must be held within 30 days of the determination that the child needs special education and related services. You can find this regulation on handout D14, which we will definitely provide to you. It's probably already been put in the chat box as well. A meeting to develop an IEP for a child is conducted within 30 days of the determination that the child needs special education and related services. And as soon as possible following development of the IEP, special education and related services are made available to the child in accordance with the child's IEP. So once an eligibility determination is made that the child needs special education related services, the first IEP meeting must occur within 30 days. Scheduling the IEP meeting. This provision appears in handout D4. Each public agency must take steps to ensure that one or both of the parents of the child with a disability are present for each IEP team meeting, or are afforded the opportunity to participate. Notifying parents of the meeting early enough to ensure that they will have an opportunity to attend, and scheduling the meeting at a mutually agreed upon time and place. The notice required under paragraph A1 of this section must indicate the purpose, time, and location of the meeting, as well as who will be in attendance. Inform the parents of the provision and special expertise about their child. Under Part C, initial IEP team meeting for a child under Part C, in this case, of a child who was previously served under Part C of the Act, an invitation to the initial IEP team meeting must, at the request of the parent, be sent to Part C service coordinators or other representatives of Part C system to assist with the smooth transition of services. For older students,
I was going to say, Amber, the part C that Amber's talking about, that is the early intervention, which is the birth to 3. So if your child was in First Steps, or now it's been renamed to Kentucky Early Intervention System, so that's when she's referring to those meetings where you would transfer and go from your IFSP through the early intervention system through the school system for an IEP at age 3. So I just wanted to clarify that if you weren't familiar with what Part C is.
Thank you for that. Ensuring parent participation. The public agency must take whatever action is necessary to ensure that the parent understands the proceedings of the IEP team meeting, including arranging for an interpreter for parents with deafness or those native language that is other than English. If a parent feels that they require an interpreter to understand the proceedings of an IEP meeting, then rather than assume such an arrangement will be made by the public agency, it would be prudent for the parent to inform the school system that the parent will need an interpreter for the meeting. Developing the IEP, strengths of the child, concerns of parents for enhancing their child's education, results of the child's initial evaluation or most recent evaluation, academic development, and functional needs of the child. And these are all things that the IEP team must consider in order to create one. Special factors to consider. An IEP team must consider special factors associated with children whose behaviors impede own learning or the learning of others. IDEA 2004 retains these requirements without substantive change from IDEA 97. The discussion below will highlight the importance of these special factors. The regulations considered for all special factors appear in handout D13. Consideration of special factors, the IEP team must, in this case of a child whose behavior impedes the child's learning and that of others, consider the use of a positive behavioral intervention supports and other strategies to address the behaviors. To address the special factors, the IEP team needs to ask, does this child's behavior interfere with his or her learning or the learning of others? If the answer is yes, then the team must talk about what the child needs and include this information into the IEP. Special factors to consider continued. Language and communication needs of the children with limited English proficiency. The term limited English proficient, when used with respect to an individual, means an individual who is aged 3 through 21, who is enrolled or preparing to enroll in an elementary school or secondary school, and who is not born in the United States or whose native language is a language other than English. Instruction in Braille and the use of Braille for children who are blind or visually impaired. The IEP team will need to provide for instruction in Braille and the use of Braille unless the team determines that instruction in Braille or the use of Braille is not appropriate for that child. And the team can only determine that after an evaluation of the child's reading and writing skills and appropriate reading and writing media. Such as an evaluation also must include an evaluation of the child's future needs for instruction in Braille or the use of Braille.
Well, and I think it's important too to bring up because not in one of the things and the great things about the special factors that we need to consider, I'll give you the example. My brother is legally blind, but Braille never would work for him because of his physical disability, the cerebral palsy. So always on Grant's IEPs, it was identified that he was blind or visually impaired, and we would answer the question that Braille was not what was appropriate, but we had to come up with another game plan of what would be able to help him and be individualized for his needs. And those things are really important, whether you're looking at behavior or any of the special factors, because those things play a huge role in a child being successful at school and having equal access. Because by far, although Grant was identified under the orthopedic impairment because of the cerebral palsy, but his vision, his blindness is what played the largest role in him being able to participate and really working with that. And again, that goes back to individualized and making sure that we, in your present levels, but then also the special factors that we are identifying those areas so that we can address them in the IEP and be able to help them best.
Yes, and we know too, if a child is having issues and they're not being able to communicate properly with the education staff or peers, then a lot of the times you'll see behaviors develop, and that goes into a whole different situation. So making sure with the special factors that each individual child's need is met and they're able to communicate in the way that they can, then it will be so beneficial to them. And communication needs of all children, with particular emphasis on children who are deaf and hard of hearing. Regardless of a child's disability, an IEP team must consider a child's communication needs, as Rhonda just said, in determining that child's communication needs. The IEP team might ask, what communicative demand and opportunities does this child have? Does this child have the skills and strategies necessary to meet those communicative demands and take advantage of communicative opportunities? Can the child fulfill his or her need to communicate in different settings? And how does the child communicate appropriately and effectively? And if not, why not? How would this deficit in communication be described? Regardless of the child's disability, the IEP team must consider whether the child needs assistive technology devices and services. Assistive technology devices means any item, piece of equipment, or product system, whether acquired commercially, off the shelf, modified, or customized, that is used to increase, maintain, or improve the functional capabilities of a child with a disability. The term does not include a medical device that is surgically implanted or the replacement of such device. Excusing a member from attending the meeting. When a member of the IEP team's area is not being modified or discussed, the member may be excused from attending the meeting in whole or in part under two conditions. Parents and LEA must agree that the member's attendance is not necessary. Parents' agreement and the LEA must be in writing. An agreement is not the same as consent, but instead refers to understanding between the parent and the LEA. IDEA specifically requires that the agreement between a parent and an LEA to excuse members' attendance at an IEP team meeting must be done in writing. If, however, the member's area is not being modified or discussed, IDEA requires the LEA and the parent to provide written, informed consent. In IDEAs refers to written informed consent. So continuing on to excusing that member from attending the meeting, they may a certain member of the IEP team be excused if his or her subject area is going to be discussed. Yes, if parents and LEA consent to excuse the member submits in writing to the parent that the IEP team input into the development of the IEP before the meeting, and parent consent to excuse any member must be in writing. And you can find more information on this as well in the handouts on D3. Parent participation at the meeting. May the agency hold the IEP meeting without the parent in attendance? And the answer is yes. The agency may hold the meeting without the parents in attendance if it has been unable to if the agency or school has been unable to convince the parents to attend. If this is the case, the agency must keep detailed records of its attempts to arrange the meeting at a mutually agreed upon time and place. And to know, it may not even just be written letters. It can be that they have documented trying to or attempting to contact a parent via phone 4 times and leaving voicemails. So making sure as a parent that you are checking voicemails when you see that the school has called or if a note gets sent home. Because unfortunately, the school can proceed if they have enough information saying that you've not been in communication with them to move forward and create an IEP for your student. And as Rhonda has said earlier in this session, you know, parent input is invaluable. It's imperative. And we want to make sure that, you know, we give our thoughts and what we feel that would best help our child, our student as well. And Rhonda, I think you're going to take this one.
Yes. So in IDEA 2000, when it was reauthorized in 2004, it does state for children identified having a disability age 3 through 5, the federal law IDEA does give states the deciding factor that they can continue 3 through 5 on an IFSP, which is Individual Family Service Plan. Now, and you'll see here at the state's discretion when they turn 3, because typically what'll happen, and in Kentucky we don't do this, although the federal law gives you the discretion to be able to do it in Kentucky, to continue having an IFSP. What we do in Kentucky is that when children are going to turn 3, and as Amber had said too when she was talking about Part C, right, is that early intervention, the birth to 3. What will happen is the school system will be notified, and the evaluation for an IEP and that transition time from the early intervention system to the school system with the IEP. Kentucky does not, and I haven't seen any situations to where we have continued and kept an IFSP, but just know that the federal law does let states at their own discretion decide for that early intervention, the 3 through 5, that they can do that. But in Kentucky, we don't. Now, if you move to another state, they may do that, or if you had moved from another state to Kentucky, what will occur is at 3 through 21, it will, if they qualify, it will be an IEP through the school system. And I know, Amber, we're getting close on time here with a lot to cover here. But one of the things here on the next slide is when the IEP is completed, that parents must be given a copy of it. And one of the things I wanted to mention here, Amber, and then I'll hand it back to you, is leave the IEP meeting with a copy of it. If for some reason that you are not able to, and they need to get it to you, I think it's very critical, at least that before the meeting ends, the conference summary be read back aloud. And if there's anything that is missing, because you always want to remember your conference summary should be an accurate picture of what took place at the meeting. Even if it's stuff that you all didn't agree on, it needs to be in the conference summary. So when it's read aloud, if there's something that's missing, ask that it be added to it. Try to leave with a copy of the whole IEP, or at a minimum, a copy of the conference summary. Sometimes if they need to get it printed out, they will send it after. I know sometimes that they will maybe send it home with the child, but the school district is required to make sure that parents, each time that the IEP is updated, at no cost to them, has a copy of the IEP.
And going right into placement, the IEP forms the basis for the placement decision, which is made by a group of persons, including the child's parent and other persons knowledgeable about the child. The placement group may or may not be the IEP team, but in all cases, the parents are members of that group and participate in making determination of placement for their child. Implementing the IEP. Once an IEP is written, it is time to carry it out. In other words, to provide the child with the special education and related services listed in the IEP. This includes all supplementary aids and services and programs, modifications that the IEP team identified as necessary. IDA also requires that the public agency ensure that all service providers who will be implementing the IEP must have access to the IEP, are informed of the specific responsibilities, and are informed of specific accommodations, modifications, and supports to be provided to that child in accordance with the IEP. When IEPs must be in effect, at the beginning of each school year, each public agency must have an IEP in effect for each child with a disability within its jurisdiction. And there's a lot more information going on to this. I want to refer you also to handout D14. There's so much more information than we could go into detail with during the session. Reviewing and revising the IEP. The IEP is not a static document. It can be changed to reflect the child's learning and growth, or as the case may be, his or her lack of expected progress, or maybe the student has reached their goals and they need different goals put in place. You can come back and reconvene and update the IEP more times in a year than just once. Obviously, we have to have an annual review, which means you have to meet at least once. But don't hesitate if you see that your child is struggling and needs some more supports that maybe not listed in the IEP, or if your child is doing, very well with what's listed in the IEP and they're meeting goals, have that meeting. It doesn't have to be a negative to come back and reevaluate and update the IEP and update, the present level of performance where your student is at to make sure that they're continuing to progress even further.
Well, in this, Amber, I think the meeting without a meeting, because we do get a lot of questions from families. Can something be changed on the IEP without having a meeting? Typically, you're going to have an IEP meeting for anything to be updated, and you want that meeting, right, with the team there. But if the parents and the LEA, again, the local education agency, your local school district, want to amend or modify the IEP, it can be done without meeting, but it is only certain conditions that it can take place. A lot of times it's if there was a minor, maybe you just had an IEP meeting and there was a minor error in it. Because typically you are going to want to have an IEP meeting for anything to be changed on that IEP. I know on the next screen here that, when may this occur? When can we change something without having a meeting? If it's after, say, the annual IEP team meeting for the school year, and it's only going to be if the parents and the LEA agree not to convene the meeting to make the change. And one of the things, and I know, Amber, you've used the example many a times, on your children's, the IEP is their names will be spelled wrong, right? So we don't have to call a meeting for that to be changed and updated and amended. So really it's very minor things, but there has to be only if both parties agree to not hold that meeting. But something can be amended if there is that agreement. But again, we always shy away from, especially if it's major things. It's important to have that team come together and have those discussions and have IEPs updated together in a meeting. So what are some special situations that are under IDEA 2004? Now, there are some situations where children are placed in private schools by the public agency, by the public school district. And then there are going to be some things that would take place. Now, this is not going to be the situation if children are placed in private school by their parent.
Rhonda,
There's also,
I'm sorry to interrupt
yes.
you, but Susan had asked a question and I just want to make sure that it's answered before we skip too much further, because I wasn't sure if it was the last screen or this screen.
Oh, thank you so much. I didn't see that. I was the agreement documented. If I'm understanding right, Susan, if you all agree to make the amendment or update the IEP without holding a meeting, that would be best in writing. Again, it doesn't specifically state, to my knowledge, that is required, but that certainly would be the recommendation. Many times it may be by email, where it could be documented that everyone was in agreement to make that amendment or update to the IEP. I hope that helped. And if that's not what you were asking, please let me know. And so when we look at also too, they're in IDEA 2004, children with an IEP transferring between schools. We're going to look at that as well, some special situations. So on the next screen here, the children who are placed in private school by the public school district. There are requirements of what the public agency must do before and what they must do after. They will have to initiate and conduct the meeting to develop the IEP in accordance to 300.320 and 300.324, which will ensure that there's a representative of the private school and faculty that attends the meeting. So the IEP would be developed and provided through the private school system, but it would, when you have the IEP meetings, it would have members of both schools, the private school and the public school. And even though that the private school is who's going to implement the IEP, the person who's held responsible for it is the local school district there as well. So there are not many situations from my experience over the years where this does occur. It can take place if that's the appropriate placement and decided by the IEP team that they be placed in the private school. Now, it is a totally different situation if it's, I just want to bring up, if it is a child placed in private school by the parent. And if you need more information on that, we can certainly help you. But that looks a little bit different. But there still are some rights that you have under IDEA, and we can kind of help you with that. Now, children with an IEP transferring between schools. In IDEA 2004, I was so pleased because it included and addressed if they move, in the two situations we're going to talk about here, is that if say you're still in Kentucky and you just move to a different school district, right, a different public agency, you may move counties. So what's going to happen is they will adopt that IEP that was from the previous school district. There's going to have to be that transfer, because what's critical about this is there not to be a gap in services, right? Because we know that our children need that continuum of services and supports. So what's going to happen if they move to a different school district within Kentucky is that they're going to go ahead and adopt that IEP from the previous school district. Now, they can update it, but typically when they move from one district to the other, is they're just going to go ahead and implement that as it is because it's under the same state regulations if it's within Kentucky. Now, there may be some reasons that it does need to be updated. So when they come to the new school district, they may go ahead and do that, even if it's not an annual review time. Now, when you move from state to state, there still has to be that partnership and work from the previous school district to the current. Now, the new school district would have to go ahead and either adopt the previous IEP, offer comparable services to them that's in their existing IEP from the previous school district, at least until they reevaluate. Now, what's going to happen in most situations, because there are different state regulations, is that typically when you move from another state to Kentucky, what happens is there is that reevaluation, so they'll offer those comparable services. They won't just go ahead and adopt the previous IEP as the current, but they will provide comparable services until they conduct the reevaluation and have the new IEP at the school district. But the important thing here is no matter where you move, if it's within the state or from state to state, you still will have comparable services and have those supports in place so there's not that gap and there's the continuum so our children can do well. Amber, I didn't know if you wanted, I kind of took over, I get a little excited about stuff.
You're totally good, Rhonda. You can go on or I can pick up. It's whichever you prefer.
You can go ahead.
Okay. So transferring the child's records, who moves from one school to another school in the same state but with different public agency. A summary of these provisions are the regulations are intended to facilitate the transition of the child from one location to another. The new public agency must take reasonable steps to promptly obtain the child's records from the previous public agency, and the previous public agency must take responsible steps to promptly respond to the request. Timeframes and transferring records. At this time, we would like to ask if you have any questions regarding the meetings of the IEP team. Because this was a whole lot of information in just a very minimal time, and we want to make sure that we don't send you away confused, and if there is any loose ends that we can answer those for you. So to summarize, the meetings of the IEP team within 30 days of the determination of the child's need for special education and related services, an IEP team meeting must be conducted to develop the child's IEP, reviewing and revising the IEP at least once a year. The IEP can be amended without an IEP team meeting, only for changes being made to the child's IEP after the annual IEP team meeting for a school year, only if parents and LEA agree not to convene the meeting, and only if the parents and LEA instead develop a written document to amend or modify the child's current IEP. Special IEP situations, children placed in private schools by public agencies, or children with an IEP transferring between schools. And I'm going to check the chat. I do not see any more questions, but I'll give it just a moment. And if while some are typing in a question that they may have, as you see here, we have the QR code listed. The evaluation link is in the box. We ask that you do take a moment to fill that out because we very much value your thoughts and opinions, what went well, what maybe needs some work. What would you like to hear about? And we're always available at the number listed, or you can reach us on our website. And Rhonda, is there anything that you'd like to add here?
Yes, I see that, Angela, you have your hand up. I'm going to try to see if this will make it where you can unmute and talk. I think you can now, if you'd like.
I see it now. I've been talking with Amber. Amber, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I have a question. So as you know, I don't have my son in public school anymore. He's in ABA school. But his the lady that runs his IEP is reaching out to me, and he needs his review or whatever. She's asking about an ARC meeting. Do you still keep that current even if they're not in the school at that time?
So do they, so that's a great question. I'm glad that you asked that. So they're enrolled in the the private school. Is the child currently getting services and supports from the public school district?
Not at this time. He's
okay.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay, so sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt there. So what that would be is so they wouldn't have a current IEP. And one of the things, because private school, this is also will help families who may also be homeschooling their child. This is where you would have developed, it's not called an IEP, but there's another plan that will be developed with the school district. And we can send you that information. So if they are not currently enrolled in the school district, then they probably don't have an IEP in effect right now. If they haven't set up and done it because they're private school right now. So there are some details, and we'll share with everybody too that's on the webinar. I can send you all a link to some helpful information about that. If they're in private school and they were placed by the parent in private school or homeschooled, there is another plan that would be developed with the school system. And if that's not taken place, then you probably need to initiate that so that that's in place for them to get services and supports. It's going to look a little different than the IEP would through the school district, but there still may be services and supports to have in place that would be able to help them. I hope that helps.
Hello.
And we're actually going to be looking at adding probably in the next several months a webinar specifically for parents that if their child's parentally placed in private school, what that process would look like. And again, in Kentucky, homeschooling is considered private school, so that would apply for either of those situations. But we can certainly right now get the information and help one-on-one if you have any more questions or kind of stepping through that process. I hope that kind of helped. And that's a great question. Well, we sure do appreciate you all joining us today, and we hope that you all can join us for the last of this series next week, which I believe, Amber, is the least restricted environment, LRE, and decision making. If I've got my, if I've not got myself mixed up here. And also, too, if there's some other topics or information that you all need that you all would love to have a webinar on, let us know that we could have it. We could have some guest speakers. We greatly value your input. If you could take a moment to complete the evaluation, I put the link in the chat, and you will receive a certificate of attendance once you complete that evaluation. We sure do appreciate you all joining us today.